Turn up the dive, feel the vibe, get ready to ignite. Untold stories in the airways, flying through the night. Experience voices, tales so bold. Streaming live, the truth unfolds. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's so I remember I share and subscribe. Join the side where truth can't hide. Aliens in the attic, UFOs in the sky. Cryptids lurking, oh my, oh my. Ghosts in the hallway, whispering your name. The paranormal, the unexplained. Become a VIP, get the inside scoop. Unlock the mysteries, be part of the group. Live streaming stories, they're talking to you. Super chats buzzing, join the crew. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's a wild member ride. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can hide. So if you've got the guts and you want to explore, tune into the Untold, it's what you're looking for. From aliens to ghosts and all that's unseen. Untold Radio Network, where the world's mysteries convene.
The paranormal, UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your host, Dr. Dean Bertram.
Well, greetings, all my fellow weirdos and weirdettes. Welcome to Talking Weird on the Untold Radio Network. I'm your host, Dean Bertram, and as always, I'm delighted that you've decided to join me tonight, or that you're listening or watching after the show on one of the many places that the video is archived, or on one of the many podcast platforms if you're just listening to the audio that it goes out on. So welcome. Thank you for joining me tonight. I've had another busy week, and up here, the fall's hit radically. I went away to Summit, Arkansas just a couple of weeks ago with my girlfriend and my daughter to shoot some of the Man Who Invented Flying Saucers documentary. And when we came back, it was summer when we left, and it's fall now, and it's my pumpkins are almost ready to harvest, which is always exciting. Speaking about the Man Who Invented Flying Saucers, that everybody who listens regularly knows is a feature documentary I've been working on for some time about Raymond Palmer, about Richard Shaver, and about the creation of modern UFO belief. A short segment from that documentary, The Shaver Mystery, which is about that incident which predates UFO history and was perhaps the most important and controversial science fiction story of the 1940s, is currently doing the festival circuit. And I bring it up again because coming this weekend, there are an awful lot of screenings. At the moment, we're at the Brooklyn Sci-Fi Film Festival, which it's already started October 14 to 20 at various Brooklyn venues. We're at the Berlin Sci-Fi Film Festival on October 19, this coming Saturday. We're at the Festival of the Unseen in Parkersburg, West Virginia, which runs October 19 to 20. We're at the Underground Documentary Film Festival this Sunday, October 20 at 6 p.m. at Sinclair's 22 in Port Orchard, Washington. And I'm actually myself at Milwaukee Paracon this coming Saturday at 1 p.m. I'll be presenting the film, and I'll be doing a presentation about the next part of the Shaver mystery, and that's at the Irish Cultural and Heritage Center in downtown Milwaukee. Again, that's October 19. My presentation's at 1 p.m. this coming Saturday, but the whole conference just looks amazing. So check out Milwaukee Paracon. It's pretty easy to find if you just Google. And then following that, we're at FilmQuest in downtown Provo, Utah from October 24th to November 2nd. And then we're at Black Sunday Film Festival, which is a special Halloween event at the Everyman Chelmsford, Saturday, 26th of October. So enough about that, although quickly about the feature. My two guests tonight are actually in the feature, The Man Who Invented Flying Saucers. I was able to see both of them when I was in Washington State earlier this previous summer, shooting a bit about the Maury Island incident. I got a wonderful interview from both of them. It was wonderful to meet them both in person because I've been friends with them virtually for a number of years now. One of tonight's guests is the mastermind of both the Conspirinormal podcast and the Strange Realities Conference, which is coming up, and we'll be talking about that tonight. He has always been interested in the strange and the paranormal, but in the last 10 years, he's channeled this into a podcast conference, and now he's expanding into YouTube, and he has a love for history, especially the history of the paranormal and conspiracy culture. And Conspirinormal is an amazing podcast, and Strange Realities, which I've only ever been to virtually, is incredible. And his other guest is our other guest is the co-host of Conspirinormal and assists with the annual Strange Realities conference. Geez, I'm slipping over my words tonight. He enjoys privately exploring the esoteric and mysteries of the United States history. So at any rate, I'm so delighted to welcome back to Talking Weird Adam Sayne and Serfiel Stevenson.
Hey
fellas.
Hello. Nice to be on. Thank you for having us, Dean.
Man, it's a delight to have you. I always love it when I get to talk to you guys. It was such a joy finally meeting you both in June 22nd at the Men in Black birthday bash.
Yeah, that was I think definitely the best part of that was hanging out with you and Brian and your friend that came down to help you, part of it, and being interviewed. That was a real blast. We had a lot of fun.
Man, I had a great time.
The first time I'd really been to Seattle, and I got to do some stuff like that, so it was like really cool.
And that was just a synchronicity. Like, you just happened to be in Seattle because I know Serfiel is based there now, but you were just visiting and just happened to be there.
Yeah. That was the first time that I got to go. So I just picked that weekend. I picked that weekend for some reasons, and then you happened to be there too. So it was awesome. It was great.
The stars aligned.
For sure.
They sure did. Now, Strange Realities is coming up, which we'll get to a little bit more later, but perhaps let's just start the show, and you guys can tell people where the dates are, and then we'll come back and talk about it again later in the show.
Yeah, so Strange Realities 2024, it's coming up in Nashville, Tennessee. It's going to be November 1st and 2nd, and also the 3rd. And the way that we're doing it this year is that this is an online conference. The entire conference is online, but 2 of those days are going to be at SIR Nashville, which is
in person as well.
In person. And then we will have a 3rd day that is online only presentations, but the entire conference is online. So you will be able, if you can't come to Nashville, don't worry, you will be able to see it.
Hybrid.
That's excellent. I'm so excited with some of the guests as well. As I was telling you guys before it started, there are people at this conference which are some of my favorite researchers in the entire field. Obviously, Joshua Cutchin and Greg Bishop, who are both, I consider, friends of mine and have both been on Talking Weird in the past, I think are 2 of the greatest minds in the entire field today. So just to see those guys alone would be worth going to the festival. And that's just some of the names.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And we really like to give the speakers the opportunity to really do whatever they want. And, so a lot of times you got strange kind of passion projects and things that end up all kind of fitting in together for some reason. But so definitely covers all the weird and paranormal, from mortuary practices of the 19th century to strange UFO cases that are neglected and explored, and all kinds of stuff, conspiracy stuff from people like Recluse. Just, we really, really have a broad spectrum of different topics.
So, Phil, you're presenting as well, and it's conspiracy divination or something, or a workshop on conspiracy divination.
Yeah, I'll be doing kind of like a arts and crafts of conspiracy kind of thing. I've been wanting to do a workshop for a long time, so I have this idea of doing this conspiracy divination game where the random selection of people, events, and things are drawn from pots randomly, kind of like a tarot spread or something like that, and you get to create your own conspiracy theory chart. So that'll be real fun as I give kind of a history of the conspiracy chart, which figures, in popular culture representations of conspiracy theory so much. So it'll be a lot of fun.
What do you think is a standout conspiracy of say the last 50 years? What's the big one on that chart?
Oh, I don't know, some kind of pyramid. Pyramids are really the big ones. Illuminati pyramids. The thing with pyramids too, as a graphical representation of conspiracy theories, is they tend to encourage things to get weirder and weirder up towards the eye of the pyramid. So the higher you get, it tends to get more paranormal. So that's why I really like the pyramids.
Yeah, it's interesting because so often people think, I guess, about conspiracy as just like parapolitics, or just politics, but there's the paranormal aspect of it. And that's when it becomes like beyond just a political conspiracy.
Yeah.
There's the high strangeness associated with some of the coincidences and synchronicities, which I'm sure weave through the timeline chart that you're talking about doing.
Yeah. I mean, you probably summed up one of my biggest areas of interest in my ongoing research project I call the Search for the Secret Rulers, that really explores the parallels of conspiracy theory, the occult, mystical and vision quests, and all these kind of things, and how much they really parallel and relate to each other. So yeah, definitely be getting weird with this conspiracy divination game. Really combines the two. And with all the weird people that'll be in the room, I'm sure we'll be sure to cook up some strange conspiracy charts.
I'm sure. Funnily enough, before the show tonight, I was catching up on some of the Strange Realities reviews or the lead up shows that you guys do when you have the guests on and they talk about what they're presenting. And I think it was the one with Joshua Cutchin on, because you've dropped a couple already and there's multiple guests, but you guys were talking about how theosophy always pops up everywhere and all these different narratives. And I know I talked to Adam before, and we'll talk about the Cottingley fairies in a minute, because theosophy certainly ties in there. But do you see theosophy popping up in your conspiratorial map as well?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think the one of the biggest reasons is that it kind of elaborated on ideas of hidden masters, something that we explored with like our Illuminati episode we did together, and the strict observance rite of Freemasonry from the 17th and or from the 18th, 19th century Europe. And so just that idea alone of there being, these hidden superiors, hidden masters behind the scenes, various degrees of supernatural nature, really, I think more than is the largest influence on conspiracy culture from theosophy.
Do you think that, and this is I'm normally, I suppose, more of a cultural historian, I don't get into the necessary nitty gritty political reality, but do you think those kind of systems then allow people to step in as hidden masters and go, I am the hidden master, and take control of an organization?
Yeah, absolutely. I think things like that continue to happen to this day and have been since, really the heyday of theosophy and even prior to that.
Maybe we'll segue straight into the Cottingley fairies, because it's such a fascinating story. For people who don't know what the Cottingley fairy photograph stories is or were, maybe you could give a bit of an overview, Adam, before we get to the theosophical connection.
Yeah, so the Cottingley fairies photos are probably one of the biggest hoaxes, paranormal themed hoaxes of all time. They come from a time, and this is right during and right after World War One. So they come from this like very kind of unusual time, kind of historically, where World War I is winding down, and because of the mass killing on the Western Front, there is a revival in spiritualism. And it's also coming at a time where the it's coming at a time where there's a lot of interest in photography, and photography is still kind of a fairly new medium at this point, even though it's really kind of been around since the 1840s. So it's been around for, just a little under 80 years. And there's this whole idea in spiritualism, a subset of it, about spirit photography. And one of the biggest proponents of the idea of spirit photography was Arthur Conan Doyle, who figures pretty prominently in this story. And but this is the idea, because photography is kind of a new and not a very widely commercialized thing yet at this point. And there's portable cameras, there's kind of starting to come in, but you got to have a dark room yourself and develop it. So there's this idea that since it's so specialized, that there's very little room for fakery. Well, the opposite is actually true, because there's fakery all over the place in the world of photography. The idea of double exposure is used to make these spirit photographs. And but nobody understands the idea. People don't understand double exposure. You have to be a photographic technician to really understand this stuff. So it comes from this time period. So these things that we understand pretty well today, people didn't really understand then. So there's this idea that you could take pictures of the afterlife, and that's a outgrowth of the spiritualist movement. So it starts out with these two young girls, Frances Griffith and Elsie Wright. And Frances is the younger girl. She is 10 years old. She's moved from South Africa with her family because her father is in the Imperial Service. And this is 1917. So he's also, associated with the military. And so she goes to live with her aunt and her uncle, and with her family. And of course, she has a cousin, Elsie, who is 16 years old. And one day, Frances is out by herself, and she falls into this creek. And in the northern part of England, they call this creek a beck. Okay, so there's a lot of references to that in the story about the beck, but that's just another word for a creek. And she comes back to her mother in the house, and she's soaking wet, and her mother, of course, is not happy about this. So when asked why she's wet, she said that she encountered fairies down by the beck, and that while she was doing that, she fell in. Well, of course, her mother doesn't believe her, because who believes in actual fairies? And so she tells Elsie, and Elsie, being an older girl, hatches up this plan to take pictures of the fairies. So what she does is she copies from this popular children's book of the time called Princess Mary's Gift Book. So she copies by hand these little figures. She adds wings to them, and she puts on little hairpins and puts them on the bushes. Right. And so she gets her father's camera, has to borrow it, and she takes this picture, and it's a very famous picture. I mean, you'll see it in a lot of places, of Frances standing behind the fairies, and they're kind of got the semicircle around her. Okay. So she takes these pictures, and the whole idea was they're going to prove that the fairies existed, right? And that they're going to prove their mother wrong. They're going to play a prank on their parents, and when their parents actually believe it, they'll tell them that it was all a hoax. Okay, so this is the idea that they're going to do, and so they decide that they also thought they're going to take another picture. So they take another picture of, this time, of Elsie, and there's this little gnome like handing something up to her, and she's kind of she's on her hands and knees, and she's bent down, like reaching out to the gnome, and that's the picture. Okay. And so those two pictures are taken with their father's camera. And of course the family, they're like, this is not real. Okay. You're not, we don't believe you. And so it kind of gets forgotten about by the family. And what happens is that the mother later on I believe this is Elsie's mother. Yeah, Elsie's mother. So this is the older girl's mother. She goes to a lecture about fairies and fairy folklore that's put on by the Theosophical Society. And what I had always read in Jerome Clark's book about this, in his chapter, was she just went to a lecture. But if you look at other sources, it was put on by the Theosophical Society. And that was a dimension of this that I had no clue about. And so, because they were interested in fairies and fairy folklores, because it really fit in with Blavatsky's ideas of root races and spiritual beings and ascended masters. So this was just another aspect of that for them. And that's why they were so into it. One of the other things that I found out earlier that I was looking into the Cottonley fairies, was that Evans Wentz, who wrote the famous book, The Fairy Folklore of the Celtic Countries, he was actually a theosophist too. So theosophy had a huge influence on this kind of revival of this idea of like fairies and fairy folklore and fae folk and these type of things. They were pretty instrumental in the early 20th century of really like bringing this about. Okay. So Polly, the mother of Elsie, she rethinks these pictures that her daughter took, and she thinks, well, maybe there was something to these pictures, and maybe these Theosophical Society people were right. So she gets the prints, she shows them to the Theosophical Society. It goes up the chain, and gets put on display at the Theosophical Society's annual conference. And the head of the society in Britain at the time, Edward Gardner, he eventually gets a hold of these things. And he's seeing these two pictures as like, wow, this is definitive proof that fairies actually exist, And he is good friends at the time with Arthur Conan Doyle. And Arthur Conan Doyle is, of course, the author of Sherlock Holmes, but also was a big proponent of spiritualism even before the First World War. But he sees spiritualism as being kind of the answer to people's grief in the First World War. I mean, you've got, the massive amount of young British and, also of the Empire, men that have been killed in battles like the Somme and Gallipoli and these places. And so there's a lot of grief in the culture and in the society, and he sees this as a way to kind of alleviate that. But he's also a huge proponent of the idea that spiritual photography, that you can't fake a photo. These are actual pictures of ghosts. And one of the things about this case that's interesting is that these pictures get sent to all these different experts, right? And they say, well, we can't find any evidence of photographic fakery. Okay. But the thing is, these are real photographs. They're just real photographs of cardboard cutouts of fairies. So there is no evidence of photographic fakery. In the last photo, which is this like photo of these fairies, I'll get to the set of photos in a second, but in the last photo, there's like three fairies in a row, and it looks kind of ethereal. And the girls would also say, well, this was proof that they were real and they were fading out of existence. But they think the idea is that one of the girls took the picture first and they thought that they didn't take the picture, so they took a picture next, and it ended up being a double exposure. So that's why it looks the way that it did. So this gets up to Arthur Conan Doyle. This gets up to Edward Gardner, the head of the Theosophical Society in Britain. And they get in touch with the family, with the girls, and they're a little older by now. By this time, it's 1919, so it's a couple years after. And they give the girls a better camera, and of course, the girls are like, "Okay, we'll take some more pictures of the fairies for you." And there's one that's there's like a side view of Frances, and then there's this little fairy that's kind of like reaching up to her, like giving her something, and you can very clearly see that like it has a very stylish 1920s bob kind of haircut, right? Which the skeptics had a field day with. Okay, and then
They got to stay up to date.
then there's one of Elsie, and she's sitting next to the fairy that's offering her a flower. And then the third picture is the one I just described, where they kind of there's Elsie or Frances are not in the picture, but they're kind of fading into this like ethereal, into out of existence. Okay. And this thing blows up in Britain. It becomes this huge thing primarily because of Arthur Conan Doyle. He publishes this article in the Strand magazine. In 1919, he prints the first two photos from 1917, and in 1920 prints the next three. Okay, even comes out with a book about this, and in 1922, and Harry Houdini even gets involved in this story. Okay, because Houdini and Conan Doyle had this real rivalry with each other, because Houdini was he was really
Arch skeptic.
Yeah, arch skeptic, wanted to debunk mediums and spiritualist claims, and he even said, okay, well, I know where these figures were they're cutouts from a particular advertising poster, and that poster gets produced, and it's obviously that they don't match up with any of the fairies. Obviously nobody bothered to even look at Princess Mary's gift book, and the fact that Elsie was a pretty decent artist and could copy these things. And so, that gives even more proof that like, well, look, the girls aren't faking this. And really the interesting part of the story is really why this thing went on for as long as it did. I mean, the girls kind of get in over their heads with this, and there's a lot of people like Edward Gardner and Arthur Conan Doyle that they see as fairly important people of their time, and they're buying this hook, line, and sinker. And meanwhile, the girls know that they made it all up, but they're having this pressure to perform and to produce these things. And the picture, like the two pictures in the latter three are really just look silly, and I mean, you can tell that there's, and the skeptics were, just saying, well, how, Arthur Conan Doyle, he wrote the Sherlock Holmes books, which is about a main character that uses logic to solve a crime. How can you, how can you like defend this that's so obviously a fake? But so what happens in the speculation is that Elsie and Frances keep this to themselves, that this is a hoax, because there's so many important people and their families involved. And really into the 1970s, like 1972, Elsie, she even attempts to confess. She sends this letter to Sotheby's, and saying that they made the whole thing up, and really Sotheby's didn't really understand what they had, so they kind of sent the letter back, and it really didn't go anywhere. Even in 1976, there's a BBC interview where she's interviewed by this guy, and she's still maintaining that these were real fairies and that what took was real. And really, finally, like 1983 is when both the girls come out, and by now, old women, and they come out and they say that this was fake, we faked it. And the speculation is that it was because of these people's reputations, these important people, that they didn't want to ruin them. And by this time, these people are long gone, they're dead, probably some of their family members are gone and dead. And so the truth finally comes out. But the interesting part about it is that Frances, when she fell into the creek, she always insisted that she saw real fairies, and that she may have been and she may have actually had a real supernatural encounter. It's just that the girls decided that to prove that, they would they would they would commit this hoax. And so it's a really interesting story. And the involvement of the Theosophical Society I find very interesting, because they really seem to have their hands in a lot of different ideas. And it's interesting how much influence the Theosophical Society has had on the wider things like New Age and all these things. And then later on you get split offs from them, like the IM movement and Elizabeth Clare Prophet. And so there's a lot of interesting ideas that are filtered through the Theosophical movement, and even down to the study of folklore, fairy folklore, and their involvement in something like the Cottingley fairies, which honestly probably could have brought them down in massive amount of ridicule had it really been exposed that if the girls had really exposed it in the 1920s.
Gosh, there's so much there. It's so fascinating. It's interesting regarding Theosophy's interest in this. Of course, Yeats, who was a member of the Golden Dawn, another leading esoteric order, which in many ways predates Theosophy, but is also one of the great proponents of fairy faith in the United Kingdom in slightly before that. So there are these involvements of genuine occult and theosophical groups in trying to perhaps maybe almost battling back against modernity, almost presenting these other older romantic traditions again.
Yeah.
And just quickly too, because something when you were talking about them, that maybe they'd had a genuine experience, or one of the girls had, and then they felt the need to perhaps fabricate something to prove it. I heard Joshua Cutchin when I was watching one of your Strange Realities lead-up podcasts, and he said something which I've always been fascinated with, and I think a number of the guests were talking about it, but it's the potential that perhaps a lot of people who have experiences might feel the need to bring some kind of evidential proof forward in this age which demands evidential proof. And then you start to think about Adamski, and you start to think about Billy Meyer, and you start to think about these people in the contactee movement. Did they maybe have some real encounters, but then felt a need to somehow fabricate something for an audience which expects a photograph? And maybe that all starts with the Cottingley fairies.
Yeah, it may. I mean, definitely the same dynamic is there with this case than some of those other hoaxes. I mean, like I said, the girls got really in over their heads with it, to where it could not be revealed because of just, I think, just the people that they saw as being in kind of like authority. It's really just this, it's really what I look at as kind of like this simple family prank that got way out of hand. And, I mean, it's really something that kind of really, like, I think even then it really hurt the spiritualist community, because of just how cheesy these things looked.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like I mentioned, the fairy with the 1920s bob, that was commented on in the time period by a lot of skeptics, and like, there's no way, I mean, but people forgot about it eventually, and then it became, I think in the 70s, it kind of got this kind of resurgence, you know, and like, because, you know, you start getting the In Search Of shows. And then I think it was featuring
Exactly.
like the Arthur C. Clarke's Weird World. You remember that show, you know, the Arthur C. Clarke show?
Mhm.
So like, I think that
Had the
like,
crystal skull in the credits. At
yeah, the
beginning, if I
crystal
remember.
skull and all that. Yeah. I mean, I definitely, you know, the idea of hoaxing is one that, like, you know, like Alan Greenfield on our show one time, you know, I asked him about hoaxes. What are the roles of hoaxes? And he's like, well, there's no such things as hoaxes, you know, no such thing as a hoax. And what he's saying there, at least what I think he's saying there, is that, you know, hoaxing can often, you know, start off paranormal phenomenon. Like it gives it a jump start. And, you know, Greenfield is definitely, you know, he's following in the lines like Jim Mosley and Gray Barker, who were
He's a
pretty
trickster.
well known for being tricksters and hoaxers, but they would call in a UFO, say that there were UFOs over whatever town, and then all of a sudden people in that town would start seeing them. So there's also, I think, a power of suggestion in there too. And like and it's also the Cottonwood Fairies is also a good case of wanting to believe something is true.
And I think Barker himself said, or it's in the Gray Barker documentary, Shades of Grey. Somebody says it was something that Barker regularly said. I think Mosley said something similar. It's all part of the pattern. Like hoaxing is part of the pattern. You can't understand the phenomenon without standing hoaxing. I think Keel said something similar as well. So those type of researchers have always understood that this is part of it. You can't divide it from perhaps whatever the reality of anomalous phenomenon is. Actually, I finally watched the other night, and it makes me think about this, talking about hoaxing and talking about families and talking about, I guess, particularly important paranormal tales in Britain. And that was Nandor Fodor and the Talking Mongoose.
Oh yeah, Jeff the Talking Mongoose. Yeah,
I was obsessed with that story when I was little because I had the British Unwin books, and in the Ghost book it had that story. It creeped the bejeebers out of me when I was a kid and read it. But the movie was excellent. I think that movie was the best presentation of the difficulty with dealing with the anomalous and the paranormal, probably since the Mothman prophecies, which I think really hit the nail. It's a very different movie with very different tone, but it still hits the problems of when you're out there. What's the investigator actually dealing with? And and it's a moving film as well. I was really impressed with it. But the Jeff the Talking Mongoose story, of course, is it just a family telling this hoax story that it gets out of control? And then you think of the Fox sisters, the start of spiritualism in the Burned Over district. So many stories seem to be the Conjuring House. You know, how many of these stories are families who get in over their heads hoaxing something, and then it ultimately sets up a frame of reference for this entire, the entire space that we're talking about.
Yeah. I think there's a fine line sometimes between, well, just fantasy and reality, but then also hoax and reality. I mean, the Fox sisters were accused of, popping their joints and stuff in order to create these rapping sounds. But it almost depends on who you ask. I mean, there's a lot of fine line in the famous poltergeist case in Britain in the 1970s. That was very well documented. The girls in that case would even try to hoax things, and almost like they have performance anxiety for the researchers. But these things would never work, and they were bad at doing it. But it would also jumpstart off all this activity. So I think that it could be something with our brains. It could be something with telekinesis or psychokinesis. Who knows? But like, I think when you get into like the power of belief in and of itself, and how, something like spiritualism really is a religion. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's in theosophy. I mean, these things are occult religions essentially. And so you're really getting into this fine line of, what is belief, what is reality. And, it's a very fine line. It's difficult to ascertain sometimes.
When you have these cases, like what you're talking about with these fairy photographs or any other number of visions of paranormal phenomena, things like this, and these larger groups with larger agendas come around and want to use this in furtherance of their belief system. And like the Theosophists and other people at that time, they really believe that they were representatives of some kind of supernatural federation that was trying to guide humanity, and they were in opposition to materialism that would result in basically the world that we have now. So, maybe in a lot of ways they were right of what would come out of a purely materialist and scientism based outlook, so they could employ what might be noble lies in order to accomplish greater goods in a lot of these ways of thinking. So, these larger groups would come up and gobble up any number of these different individual cases or individuals.
Do you think that still kind of happens today, right? In some ways,
Yeah.
like the way.
I mean, you think about the UFO stuff.
Exactly.
I mean, it's the same kind of thing: obsession over creating physical evidence, all the possible hoaxing that goes into that, and essentially, I think the same kind of battle of worldviews and spiritual concepts is going on right now around the modern conception of UFOs that we're going through right now.
Here, I think
someone like a Robert Bigelow or something probably has pretty much the same aims to, combat pure materialism and scientism with some kind of spiritual perspective.
Certainly Greer would be another example.
Yeah.
A very clear example. And I think sometimes too that in the UFO field, it had almost methodologies start to be built into it, which let the imagination of individuals feed into a broader narrative and recreate this imaginal space people lived in. And I'm particularly thinking about the alien abduction phenomenon, which in some ways might be different to a lot of other things, because you have all these support groups and therapy groups, and people start sharing their narratives and borrowing from each other's narratives. And all of a sudden, this other reality, often with the help of people who are invested in it, like the Bud Hopkins or the John Max or the David Jacobs, but all of a sudden there is this incredible world building, which extends perhaps not in as organized a fashion as we think of theosophy co-opting these things, but there's still a functional, some type of mechanism, which is bringing all of these different experiences and narratives into something which people are trying to present as a narrative, which makes a bigger sense than the little individual narratives being fed into it.
It's just participation in mystical narratives. I mean, it's the same thing as Rosicrucianism, Freemasonry, spiritualism, and the UFO phenomenon is a great example of that in our modern times.
Absolutely. What are some other talks that you guys are really looking forward to hearing? Because I know you guys are the organizers of the festival and you curate it and bring the different speakers in, but what are some standout talks you guys are really like, I'm really looking forward to hearing what this guy's or this gal's come up with for this one?
I tell you, I will, some of them I know, and some of the topics that I know, and some that I don't. Timothy Renner's is one that I'm looking forward to hearing. He's been talking about for a while, which is the disappearing evidence. So in other words, things that they're trace evidence of like a paranormal happening. For instance, like the original Patterson-Gimlin film is lost, apparently. All we have is just copies. We don't have the original film. So those type of things. I'm looking forward to Katie Andrews, her topic, which is going to be about horror movies from the 1970s, and it can be kind of tied into paranormal stuff, but she's just looking at it really in general, and like the effect of those on the culture. I'm
sure you'll dig that, Dean.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I love, who I love talking about horror movies, a couple of Strange Realities ago. David Metcalf's thing on horror movies was incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was good.
I still
Yeah.
remember that.
Yeah. Brent Rains is always great. Brent, has been doing this for so long, and he
Yeah,
has
he's
like
really
so
our
much
elder
worth of
statesman OG.
of material to really impart to everybody. I mean, I
I
feel
was
almost
excited
bad
to see
because
you
like,
had him, actually, to be honest. I was like, wow,
yeah,
this is going to be a great one.
yeah. I need to give. I always, I need to give like Brent more than an hour to present because really, like, he's just got so much there, and um, he's always great. Um, of course, I'm looking forward to Josh's. Recluse is doing something on Shakespeare mysteries, which I think is
Okay.
excellent.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
Nevaeh, my friend Nevaeh, who does Nevaeh's Nightmare YouTube channel. I mean, she is a mortician student, and she's going to be talking about like funerary practices and the history of it, and like that's cool too. I mean, she's like the youngest of the group, so I guess Gen Z is like actually represented at this conference for once. So, but I'm Tim Banal. He was talking about uh UFOs and sitcoms. So it's just it's a wide
Fantastic.
variety at Strange
And I think
Realities.
that comes from us
You
really
don't know what
giving the speakers their freedom to do whatever
right,
they want, and it ends up all
right.
connecting somehow.
And I think the name Strange Realities, I think it really, I think it's perfect because like, these are all strange realities. These are all, the realities that we're in every single day. But just like just like, that there is like a strange part of our lives that needs to be celebrated. So, I think that you're definitely not going to get anything that's normal in any of these presentations. You're going to get something that's really esoteric and makes you think a little bit more than just kind of like surface level paranormal stuff.
I'm excited to see Nathan Paul Isaacs as well. He's always great.
Yeah.
Yeah. We just talked to him, and he's really digging through otherwise obscured UFO cases to find this whole really wild story and stuff to explore, that he's really gone in depth more to this particular case, I think, than anyone has, it sounds like.
We have a question here from the Dead End Collective, which is a good question. He says, or her, I don't actually know who the Dead End Collective is, although they're a regular listener. Do you feel that trauma is at the root of all paranormal claims? I'll throw it to you guys, but interestingly, both Jackie and Bill Kasoulis, who wrote the book about the Silver Bridge tragedy, are writing a new book which ties paranormal experiences to trauma. But what do you guys think about that question? Do you feel that trauma is the root of all paranormal claims?
I don't know if all, I would say, but I mean, I would definitely say that there's probably a good percentage that is. I was just having this talk with Soraya from Where Did the Road Go. We actually talked about a little bit about this, and yeah, I would say that there's definitely something there that people that have maybe, and I think there's been studies about this, that people that have these experiences have some sort of trauma in their lives. And it's not to say that necessarily all those people do, but definitely something like alien abduction or the alien contact experience. I mean, it's a traumatic thing in and of itself, but is that rooted in some kind of deeper trauma? So, I don't know. I mean, there's some aspects of those experiences that, maybe they're an actual cover for something else. So, it's hard to tell. And I think it would depend on the individual. But it might be a good question for like a researcher to ask of like what kind of trauma somebody would have in their life that would cause this. But sometimes it could also just be environment and where you are and what happened in an area historically. I mean, I don't, maybe it might
That
make
might be a
you
result
more,
of trauma itself, right?
yeah, right. It might make you more receptive, possibly. But also, I think some people are just born to be more receptive to this stuff than other people. I think they could have a genetic component too.
Yeah, I think it often puts people closer. And I mean, you can see where in all kinds of different cultures and time periods, initiatory societies employ it to try to get people to some next state of consciousness or something like that. So I think it has a lot to do with it, but not all. Kind of what Adam said. But maybe the more profound and explicit and those type of things versus there may be a lot more things that are paranormal that are a lot more subtle that people don't tend to even think about as being paranormal, that are less involved with trauma, I think.
It's interesting too, of course, because there's much talk and theories and conjecture, and some people might say proof that programs like MK Ultra actually induce trauma to gain control over people and to change people's mindset and to fracture the personality. So I do wonder if sometimes people aren't somehow impacted by something and have an experience. Or alternatively, I think it's possible too that the paranormal experience itself is traumatic. So perhaps it is, sometimes perhaps they are triggered or they are a cover, as Adam said, or but maybe sometimes it's the experience itself which is the traumatic moment. I mean, I can't think of many things more traumatic than some paranormal experiences that we've all heard about, alien abduction, for example, or even an encounter with something in the woods. I mean, some of these things would be terrifying beyond what we normally experience. So that's traumatic of itself, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree with you there.
So what about you, Ad? What are some of the things you're really looking forward to, Serfiel? Because we heard some of Adam's. So there's some that Adam didn't mention that are on your must-see list at your own conference.
It's always really really engaging and amazing. But I think Adam kind of feels the same way. We often kind of have to catch up afterwards, and we'll watch presentations again recorded to really grasp everything, because we're usually so involved running around having to just conduct the business of the conference. But more than anything, just the fellowship. I mean, I think that is something that I've never experienced anything like it. It's really something special to get everyone together. And after doing this 5 years in a row, we've really got the sense of community. And more than anything, I look forward to that conference outside of the conference and in the hallways and the after parties and giving people rides to the hotels and getting lunch and dinner together and just hanging out, and those kind of conversations, where you really get the scoop and off the record perspectives and things that people may not want to say on a podcast or on a recorded presentation, but real nitty gritty weird stuff goes down outside of the conference, in this kind of conference inside of a conference.
I heard a number of the people that you were talking again on those Strange Realities lead-up shows. So many of them, so there's like going back to family, or it's an event where everybody feels at home. And I noticed this year you even have one of your speakers. She's traditionally just been a guest, and she's been brought into the speaker fold as well. So it seems like I mean, I haven't been there. I've been I've watched it virtually, and the chat rooms they're always welcoming, but it seems like it is very much a big paranormal family. It's Strange Realities, very welcoming from what I can tell.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you come one time and you're already family, but second time you come, it's like everyone's already really tight. And it's almost like a weird paranormal kind of think tank, and everyone catches up on everything you've been doing and researching, and you get previews of the ideas and books people are developing, and you get to see that pan out in the future years and conferences. And so it's very rewarding. It really is like a family reunion.
How do you guys actually, because I'm interested in curation as somebody who curates film festivals and has been doing it for almost 2 decades now. How do you guys curate it? Like, what are your processes when you come together and go, "We're gonna put something together. Who are we gonna get in? How are we going to, to decide what we're doing?"
I think a lot of it is just that, I've been able to find these people as a little group outside of this conference.
Really
And
as an extension of the podcast at
yeah,
first,
it's really an extension of the podcast. I mean, it's really like from us doing the podcast that we have found these people. Um, like, I mean, we're pretty close to like guys like Tim Badal, Josh, Timothy Renner, Soraya. Those are pretty much like, our kind of fellow podcast guys, and our in friendships. But, like, I mean, Nathan and, we found him from, Penny Royal, and, them being so pretty real close to where I am now. But, and Ren, same way, it's a part of that family. It's really just knowing these interesting people and being able to like have a place to like for them to give their ideas. And some of it might be, like we might have some local people here that we want to we want, like Kendall Lackey. I mean, she lives here in Nashville, and she's been on the podcast, and all these people, everybody that's been a part of this has been on the podcast at least once. So it's really just like, like you said, I think it's like a family kind of setting, but like somebody like Micah Hanks. I mean, Micah, I have known for extremely long time. He was like my second guest, I think, on Conspirinormal, or third
Wow.
guest on Conspirinormal way back in 2012. And like really Micah was pretty instrumental in like kind of giving me the idea of doing this, because I wanted to do this in 2017, but it never materialized. And but we did it in 2019. So to have him actually here, hopefully coming here to Nashville, is going to be a really good treat. And so, I mean, these are people that I've just that I've known for a good while, and I think it's just like, what are the people that are willing to come here and do this and be a part of it? And that's really kind of how it goes. As far as
Now,
like kind of thinking about who we want, and some of it may be like, who do we want to have that we haven't had before? I mean, that's like Robert Guffey. I mean, he's going to be part of it this year, and
it really is some, as I call it, homeboy stuff, as far as like it really is shoestring and mostly dependent on, existing friendships and collaboration. We don't have huge budget to just, get anyone we want and, make the perfect roster for whoever. And so it's like, it really is a natural kind of thing.
Well, it's a spectacular roster, and when we finish shortly, I'm going to end before the normal closing credits with your actual your ad, which has more details in it. But do you want to tell people a little bit just now what the dates are again, how they get tickets?
Mm-hmm.
I do have a link within the show notes that anybody watching or listening to this can go to, and they should be able to link straight through. But if you guys want to point them anywhere at all, or you want to recommend, how they get tickets or what days they should go to and the days it's running, I'll give you guys the floor now.
Yeah, so strangerealitiesconference.com, that's the best place to find information. It's the best place to find tickets. There is a link on the front page there that will, so you get tickets here. You click on that goes to Eventbrite, and there's really two different tiers. We have the $70 for to come on November 1st and on the 2nd, and that also is going to you will get in to stream the conference as well, so you get to stream the whole thing
and watch it later.
Watch it later, which is a big thing. If you miss something, if you go out and do something in Nashville and then you want to catch somebody's presentation later on, you can do that at your leisure. There's also the $30 online only tier, and that is just for online only for all 3 days. And just added just recently, a few days ago, we have just a Friday day pass, which is $40, and a Saturday day pass, which is $40. So if you want to come, you don't want to spend money on a Nashville hotel or Airbnb, come to Nashville if you're close, come check us out. That's only a $40 charge.
Very, very, very reasonable. Well, I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to close out with an ad with all the details. If people want to click through, they can go to the show notes wherever they're watching or listening, and they'll be able to go straight through from there. But I can't thank you guys enough for joining me. It's always such a great joy to talk to you.
Thank you, Dean.
Thank you, Dean. It's always great to talk to you.
Well, until I talk
we
to you
just
guys
had you
again
on our show not too long ago. So
yes, sir.
They should go check out Conspirinormal. I love being on your show.
Yeah.
It's always great. And until I talk to you guys again, until I talk to everybody else out there, keep it weird.
Want to continue spooky season after the 31st? Would you like to dive deeper into the world of the paranormal, the occult, cryptozoology, and other unexplainable topics? Then the Strange Realities Conference is the right one for you. Live and online in Nashville, Tennessee, November 1st and 2nd at SIR Nashville, and November 3rd